working together here at ASME to help the community stay connected on science, engineering, public policy, and just issues of the days. Today, I'd like to welcome Congressman Paul Tonko for joining us. Congressman, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's great to be with you, and as a fellow engineer, it's an honor to be associated with the ASME. Actually, I'm a mechanical engineer, so ASME bears great relevance with me.
Well, we know that, Congressman, and again, we wanted to say thank you for what you do. As you know, and I'll say for the benefit of our audience here, New York is the fourth largest state for ASME in terms of both professional and student memberships. And also, it's something, I believe it's 5 of our manufacturing institutes are involved in the direct area of your jurisdiction. So it fits for a bunch of reasons. And besides that, it fits because you're a good guy. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's good to be with you, and I appreciate the invitation. Again, thank you for bringing to the forefront the engineering perspective on public policy. I think that's so important.
It is. And let me do a little bit of an introduction about you, Congressman. Just every time I read this, there's something new that gets added. So, and then we'll break right into this. So,
okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Paul Tonko is in his 6th term, is a 6th-term member of the U.S. House of Representatives, representing New York's 20th congressional district in the Capital Region, including the cities of Albany, Schenectady, Troy, Saratoga Springs, and his hometown of Amsterdam. He's a member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce and was elected by his peers to serve as the chair of the subcommittee on the environmental and climate change. There, he oversees a wide range of issues, including clean water, regulation of toxic substances, national climate action, and also, in addition to that, he has joined the Committee on Natural Resources to continue his service on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. In addition to these committees, Representative Tonko co-chairs the Sustainable Energy and Environmental Coalition. He's a longtime honorary chair to the Alliance to Save the Energy, a bipartisan nonprofit coalition that promotes energy efficiency across all sectors of the economy. Prior to serving in Congress, Representative Tonko was the President and CEO of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And before that, in New York, he served in the New York State Assembly for a short 25 years, 15 of which he was the chair on the Committee of Energy. He's a graduate from Clarkston University with a degree, as he just told us, in mechanical engineering and industrial engineering, and is a former engineer for the New York State Public Services Commission. Truly fits with everything we do, Congressman. So I'd like to let our audience know that during the Q&A, should they raise their hand, we will figure out, we will unmute you and allow you to ask questions. If you have some additional questions, we encourage you to submit those through the chat feature. With that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how the members of Congress are adapting while working and campaigning and serving their districts. Representative Tonko, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Hey, thank you. Thank you, Tom. And again, thank you for the kind invitation. And again, as an engineer, let me begin by expressing how excited I am to speak with so many people who share the passion for engineering and innovation. I think engineers have a special ability to see problems and then seek solutions. And boy, do we need that in our present day policy development. We're in a very live in a very complex world. And so the solutions require facts and data and science-based and evidence-based solutions. I like to think that all of that background in engineering serves me well here in Congress. And I believe it will serve Congress well if we had more engineers in this institution. So any of you out there listening that have a propensity to serve in the public sector through elected capacity, give it a shot. I also want to take this time to applaud the good work that the society does and implore you to do all you can to stay involved in the policy-making process. Certainly the pandemic is impacting our work in Congress and the district. And it again requires us to pay great attention to science, to be very deliberative about facts and data and science. And, hopefully we will have in the near future some good discussions. I hope in the tail end of July here, we'll have some really good negotiations on a next relief package for COVID. Just about 2 months ago, the 15th of May, so it's more than 2 months ago now, the HEROES Act was passed in the House of Representatives that provides a lot of angles, perspectives of response to the so many sectors of the economy that have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So in the weeks and months ahead, we'll shift our attention from immediate pandemic response, items like testing and treating and tracing, to economic recovery that will enable us to create jobs and build back a better economy. I think this moment provides us a great opportunity with the crises at hand. There's a great opportunity to re-engineer our economy so that it's more robust, more fair, more competitive, and more sustainable. And we can do that with cutting edge dynamics and with data that had been compiled prior to the COVID-19 impact. There are great opportunities, certainly for economic recovery and job creation in clean energy, sustainable and resilient infrastructure, in retrofitting buildings, incentivizing advanced manufacturing, including strengthening domestic supply chains, which has been a lesson we've learned, and environmental remediation. So the first component of that effort, I believe, is our HR2, the House of Representatives Bill number 2, high priority, labeled number 2, the Moving Forward Act, which passed the House 2 weeks ago. This package would make comprehensive investments in our nation's infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, which really need our help. They're ranking deficient, but also our water systems, our broadband infrastructure, and very importantly, grid modernization. This is part of the House's agenda to reduce pollution, certainly a critical challenge, create good jobs, and supercharge America's post-COVID economic recovery on a sustainable foundation by building a new generation of resilient infrastructure, deploying clean energy, pushing America back into the lead in cutting-edge research, developing a 21st century workforce, which is key, I believe, to the engineering community, and rooting out long-standing injustices as our nation rises to meet the climate challenge that faces the world. The package includes over $47 billion to support building modernization and retrofits that will improve the energy efficiency, the health and resilience of buildings. This includes programs focused on homes, on schools, and public buildings. It also includes more than $38 billion to accelerate the transition to a sustainable transportation system with investments that support the development of a robust network of charging and refueling infrastructure, including a focus on deploying infrastructure in what are called underserved areas. We know grid modernization is necessary to integrate the growing number of renewable and distributed energy resources being added to our nation's electricity mix. There's a $3.5 billion investment to support those investments that will improve the reliability, the resilience, and certainly the security of the electric grid. The security is important these days, plus additional funding for energy storage and microgrid deployment. The package includes another $1 billion for grants and other financial assistance to promote solar energy deployment in low income and underserved areas. Now, more than ever, there is a need to ensure that clean energy investments are reaching every neighborhood in our country. Environmental justice needs to be part of the plan. This is a down payment to support development of community solar projects in our underserved areas. There are also long-term extensions of many clean energy tax incentives, including the investment tax credit and the production tax credit, and a renewal of the advanced energy manufacturing tax credit. I know an important one for the MEs out there, which was oversubscribed and very effective during the Recovery Act a decade ago to support domestic manufacturing of new energy technologies. There's also a significant increase in funding for drinking water infrastructure, including with the focus of getting lead out of water systems and remediating PFAS contamination. And finally, the package includes over $100 billion to support broadband deployment. The COVID pandemic has exposed major United States economic vulnerabilities, starting with vast gaps in our nation's certainly broadband activities and infrastructure. In my district, I've heard from workers, students, we've heard from teachers, business owners, healthcare providers, and countless others that are facing this challenge. This legislation takes long overdue steps to propel America's broadband infrastructure forward for both the unserved and underserved areas of our country. This sort of bold infrastructure package can be a model for future federal investment that will improve our economic competitiveness while addressing a climate pollution crisis. Being realistic about the Senate's priorities, it may not be possible to enact many of these provisions this year, but they could become the fundamental foundation components of future comprehensive climate legislation, which I hope will be able to be considered next year. Over the past 18 months, the Energy and Commerce Committee has done a lot of work on developing a potential national climate legislative framework. Obviously, our hearing schedule has been upended, and there is uncertainty for the legislative calendar this year, but we have continued to meet with stakeholders and think about the future of federal climate action. For the next 6 months, we plan to continue this work to develop the tools and the policies that will be needed to achieve ambitious climate and clean energy goals. And it's my belief that this work must be done in a way that is science-based and evidence-based, with the goal of building a broad coalition of support that can get 218 votes in the House. As part of this process, the Energy and Commerce Committee released a discussion draft of legislation in January known as the Clean Future Act, which we continue to solicit feedback on, to refine and to expand, with the goal to be prepared to legislate comprehensive climate action as soon as possible. That's still the plan, even if our attention has been shifted to pandemic responses. In the meantime, we'll try to get as much enacted this year as possible. The Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee has proposed an energy bill focused on innovation and RD&D. I believe these investments must be part of our clean energy agenda, and I certainly hope we might be able to make some progress immediately. I want that next generation of clean energy technologies to be researched, designed, manufactured, and certainly deployed in the United States. Because if we do not lead the clean energy revolution, other nations will, and our economy will suffer likewise. But without a sustained federal commitment to research, many of these early demonstrations and innovative concepts will not become commercially feasible. So I hope that my Senate colleagues are able to advance an energy bill this year that the House can respond to. Ultimately, if we're going to get serious about mitigating the impacts of climate change, of curbing our greenhouse gas emissions, and becoming the world's leader in the clean energy race, we need engineers to make these goals a reality. Whether it is a clean energy deployment and development, improving infrastructure resiliency, or others that are adapting efforts, engineers will be at the forefront of our climate solutions. So let me just share with you, I'm old enough to have been part of the global race on space. And being an adolescent, looking for a career choice, looking on my education path of the future, I was inspired by the work that was done in the 60s to fight away the impact of the Sputnik moment and develop a plan that was done, as President Kennedy said, not because it was easy, but because it's hard. And we won that race because we committed with great passion to the global race on space. That inspired this engineer to search my way to an engineering career. And now I get to do policy development based on many engineering concepts. So let that moment, that whole moment of Sputnik, still speak to us. And let us have an energy revolution here driven by energy know-how coming from engineers that really helped us win the global race on space, and then now can help us win the global race on clean energy. So thank you once again for the invitation to join virtually. I'd be happy to hear more about your thoughts and priorities for Congress and try to answer any questions you have about our ongoing work. And thank you again, Tom.
Well, Congressman, thank you. You hit a couple of sensitive parts with us. With me in particular, as a fellow engineer, mechanical engineer, you give me data, I can solve any problem. And you're spot on with your thought process. It's amazing to watch the statistics, the daily statistics of the pandemic as it rolls out. and what we're trying to achieve. It's all data driven, and you're right on. The for us, we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Apollo landing.
Yep.
Many of our members, as you know, were part of that. We ran a couple of special programs and hosted. I was extremely pleased and a high honor for me to host an event out at the Museum of Aviation in Long Island with 2 former mission control specialists and 5 astronauts. It was an interesting program. And what you said truly sparked little interest in me. It was at that in the 60s, it was truly, and I could say it now because I'm here in Texas, we all played by Texas rules. And did we know what we were doing? We had data, and it was trial by error, but we did it. We won the race. And it was
Tom, can I offer an anecdote to that?
Sure.
When I was a freshman in Congress, 2009, I won in 08, and I began serving in 09. That happened to be the 40th anniversary, right, of the landing on the moon. I got to shake Neil Armstrong's hand, and it just hit me. What a golden moment. This, we had that Sputnik defeat, and then we came together as a nation in a multi-partisan way, driven by this pioneer spirit that is unique to our DNA. And we said, we're going to take that defeat and have it serve as inspiration. And nothing could stop the forces that we had going as a nation. I remember it as a young adult. And we were determined everywhere you went, in school, at the playground, at church, at family dinners, at your grandparents' house, Sputnik, Sputnik, Sputnik. We were going to land the first person on the moon as an American, staking the flag on the surface of the moon. And son of a gun, shaking his hand reminded me that we're in the same moment. And we can't afford to be fractured as a democracy over partisan pettiness. We need to come together, follow the initiatives of a clean energy innovation, and win this global race. Because I agree with the former President Obama when he said, whoever wins this global race will be the kingpin, the go-to economy in the international community. I believe that wholeheartedly. Look what had happened when we won that global race on space. So we unleashed untold amounts of technology in every sector of the economy, and it boosted our status worldwide and really gave us a great opportunity for economic growth. We need that moment again. And this is us searching for our Sputnik moment to make certain we go forward with commitment through policy and resources and with the strength of engineers to make things happen again.
Well, thank you for that. Let's switch a little bit. We've got a couple of questions here, more than a couple. Our first, I'm going to ask Connie Lawson, who chairs our committee on government relations for ASME. Connie, good morning.
Good morning. Congressman, thank you very much for your time and for your comments.
Oh, my pleasure.
Love it. Your leadership has been really outstanding when it comes to energy, innovation, infrastructure, and really appreciate the outline that you gave us on the Move Forward Act. As we hope to move forward on some of these efforts, I realize that we have to see what's going to happen with the Senate and whether they are able to pass their energy bill and whether they pass anything in infrastructure. But do you see any kind of opportunity before Congress adjourns to be able to get either the infrastructure bill passed and signed into law? Are there negotiations going on or some kind of agreement with the administration and the Senate?
Well, well, Connie, I would just say that basically the important thing is that I think that while we passed our infrastructure bill and even our HEROES bill that passed in May, which is 2 months ago, is now, I think, being looked at by the Senate. But I think that, there are a number of forces that go back to the 2016 and 2018 elections. And certainly the president committed to an infrastructure package. The Senate, I think, has to look at the growing pressures to re-engineer our economy in this post-COVID experience. And so I'm hopeful that that they will embrace an infrastructure bill. We need to put together the ingredients so that the clean energy investments that will be made can serve us well. As we know, some of this will happen in the midland of the country, in the heartlands of the country, and we need to get it to the coastal areas for consumption. So there needs to be an investment made in many, many ways. But the amount of grid modernization that is required in order for our electric grid to transmit that renewable power provides a lot of hope that infrastructure will be addressed. We're hearing from the Senate that they're looking at some of these items. We believe that our Moving Forward Act, with the addressing of $3.5 billion for investments in reliability and resilience and security of the electric grid, will serve as a challenge in the other house. And also the development of storage and microgrids and interregional transmission infrastructure, which we've done in our bills. So is there an appetite? I think there should be. I think that the assignment here is to grow our economy back, to really re-engineer it, to look at those dynamics that were very evident through data compilation prior to COVID-19. And that spoke forcefully to the investments being made in clean energy and the amount of jobs that were being produced. They had almost a double the rate of job growth in the country coming from the clean energy sector. But with COVID, we've lost about 600,000 to 700,000. So our work has got to be to do the tax policies that will get this sector going again. And a lot of that can happen with the infrastructure investment that we make through an infrastructure bill. I think the pressure's on the Senate to respond. We hear that there's interest out there by some of the senators, and we just encourage everyone to advocate in that fashion so as to move that potential along.
Thank you for that.
Great.
Connie,
thank you, Congressman.
You're welcome.
Congressman, we just as an aside, we ASME hosted a conference on data storage, and the gentleman, one of the engineers from NRAL, gave an unbelievable presentation on the grid and the current views of one solution doesn't fit every part of it. How do you segregate it? How do you keep it independent? What's the redundancies? I was very impressed on how much NRAL was into the futuristic views of what happens with the grid, and it parallels exactly what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question here from our immediate past president, Saeed Jahangir. Saeed, good morning. Aaron, can you unmute Saeed?
Good morning.
How are you, sir?
Good morning, Saeed.
Good morning, Congressman. It's very nice that you participated in this discussion. It's great to see you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank you for your continued support of the engineering activities, specifically in energy infrastructure and manufacturing. One of the issues that COVID-19 pandemic has uncovered is that it has shown the vulnerability in our manufacturing supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if there are any discussions in Congress currently about how we can fix that as we move forward with the economic recovery packages with respect
Sure.
to.
Well, Saeed, I think you do point out a very important learning curve that we developed with this pandemic, and that is supply chains. They were unintended lessons, and certainly remind us of the improvements we need to make if we certainly want a robust manufacturing arena. The supply chain issue has been talked about now for several weeks because of the learning curve that came with bottlenecks in those supply chains for necessary personal protective equipment, hospital supplies, ventilators, medications. And it reminded us of the importance of flexibility that we need to have in the manufacturing sector. So I know that you folks, ASME had my good friend and colleague Haley Stevens, Congresswoman Stevens, on as a guest recently to talk about crucial importance of things like additive and advanced manufacturing. And, you know, that is spot on, in my opinion. We need to invest in developing our advanced manufacturing capabilities. We need to leverage both the public and private sectors through capable tools that we have at the Manufacturing USA Institutes. And I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of the Congresswoman's American Manufacturing Leadership Act that puts more funding and support toward those institutes. We're going to have to be very focused, laser sharp, in how we apply assistance, resources, and develop policy so that we can very, very much reclaim manufacturing in the United States of America. And a lot of that will start with innovation, supply chain reforms, and developing the workforce that is absolutely essential.
Thank you, Congressman.
Okay.
So, Congressman, we have another question here from one of our governors, Mary Lynn Ralph, former governor, just ended a 3-year term with us. She asked, you mentioned the space race, and some people feel that currently we have a moonshot type need to come up with an effective system for carbon capture. Can you comment on how carbon capture might fit into what engineers can focus on to really make an impact in the world?
Sure. We, in our climate bill, in our comprehensive bill, the Clean Future Act, we address all sorts of decarbonization efforts and moving towards clean energy, a clean energy standard. But, it is important for us to look at all technologies and developing those technologies so that they become all the more useful in our response to the decarbonization effort. Carbon capture should be certainly part of the work that we do, part of the research development that we do. It should be part of accompanying some of the bridge efforts that we will have to clean energy. And so I think investing in that kind of technology will be very critical, very important. We have a very robust goal, net zero greenhouse gas emission by the year 2050. That means all sectors, it'll be comprehensive across the board and economy-wise. And, wherever the tools need to be, including carbon capture, we need to do. And there are some developing theories and technologies that are coming forth with that carbon capture, so that we should be open to any of those discussions.
Thank you. We have another question here from Scott Oakton. It says, Scott asks, what international support can we provide to combat COVID-19 worldwide? He believes that the U.S. leadership is needed to further protect American security and the economy.
Well, I think the whole thing comes to a triad of activity: testing, tracing, and treatment. And in the testing category, I think we need to make certain that we help in the manufacture of those testing kits. We need to make certain that we put together a good strategy for tracing, for contact tracing, and then to share resources worldwide to make certain that treatment is available. Now, even in this country, we're still looking now at critical situations where, record numbers of unemployed are impacting us as we speak. And as those people fall into the ranks of the unemployed, there goes their healthcare coverage because it's tied to private sector offerings. So we need to begin at home, obviously, with the treatment affordability, but then to assist those governments around the world that, are involved in this international pandemic. It's rather interesting to see the numbers in the US with cases and deaths and compare that to other economies and other nations. So we have a lot of work to do at home, but anything we can do to assist in the research, the development of a vaccine, which seems to be the linchpin here of response. We're moving along steadfastly with several modelings of a vaccine, but it's still probably a year or two away. And it's the best thing we can do for the international community. And in the interim, to provide whatever assistance we can provide for testing and tracing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I'm going to ask our Managing Director of Strategic Alliances, Dennis Killian. He's got an interesting question with regards to infrastructure. Dennis, good morning.
Good morning. Congressman, well, first of all, thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure, Dennis.
I'm sort of curious. I was listening and very intrigued with the infrastructure legislation. And I was also wondering, given the fact that, it may take some time, to work that through Congress. Do you feel there are opportunities to work with private industry in the interim to bring clean energy solutions to market?
Oh, absolutely. I think, you know, a lot of the efforts in our climate comprehensive bill in the Clean Future Act incorporates bipartisan ideas and oftentimes referred to as the low-hanging fruit. I think that you know, having worked at NYSERDA, having led NYSERDA, the Energy Research and Development Authority in New York, we were infamous for our public-private partnerships that were environment/energy innovation related. And so I think there's a great opportunity for us to respond to the given infrastructure that we require. I mean, working with R&D to develop standardized charging stations, to the ability to do higher, quicker speed, quicker fill infrastructure. You know, obviously we're going to invest in that in our Moving Forward Act, in our infrastructure bill that would partner with the private sector, working on efforts to do the battery storage issue with private sector so that, you know, we can look at developments there. We've been working with a hydrogen operation in my district that is dealing with fuel cells and hydrogen as a response. So a lot of opportunity that we have with infrastructure and innovation to be able to go forward and really stay on pace with the changes that we can bring, all while we're working on the overall veiling of a comprehensive bill that will reach into every sector. We need to do those immediate success stories so that we're showing progress and working towards a great outcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So by way of reference, last evening I attended a session, our Houston section, our Southern Texas sessions monthly meeting. And the gentleman, the CEO who's heading up a project to bring high-speed rail between Dallas and Houston gave the presentation. It's all about bringing the JR Central technology from Tokyo, the bullet train, into the United States. The infrastructure, I was amazed to hear that it took them only 6 years to get the environmental impact statement prepared and approved for almost 400-mile swath through the state of Texas. And I read this next question here about, it's from Stephen Roberts. How can Congress mitigate barriers that environmental reviews produce? I know you and I had a conversation about this, but
yeah, we're looking at both the market and regulatory barriers that are part of the given moment. And I think it's important for us to do whatever we can without diluting the benefits that come with these regs, to streamline, to make certain that we streamline the permitting processes and the review process that might be associated with various projects. I think that's so important to make certain that, you know, we're not killing projects simply with an over demanding bit of time that is required. And I think there's a way to standardize and collaborate and streamline so that a lot of these new technologies and the new infrastructure required can move along at a pace that will enable us to respond to the robust threshold years that are part of our comprehensive strategy. I think that's so important. You know, you mentioned, Tom, the high-speed rail. Those initiatives that came with the Recovery Act of over a decade ago were so much welcome news in upstate New York. We had begun with Secretary LaHood's assistance, who was a tremendous partner in helping us with high-speed rail. We are moving along at great pace in upstate New York, and then the whole thing turned around when the leadership in the House changed and there wasn't support for high-speed rail. But I think it's a must for an economy like ours. There are those trains that we can replicate and incorporate into our infrastructure strategy. And I think it's important to do that. When you think of the activity, for instance, for my region that can take place from Chicago to Boston and Montreal to New York City. I'm pretty much in that crosshair. And what you could do with high-speed rail to build an economy, to network businesses, it would be a tremendous shot in the arm. And I think it's the kind of futuristic spin on infrastructure that we need. And there's dollars for high-speed rail that we incorporate in our package. So hopefully we can move forward and address some of those technologies that are happening as we speak in industrial nations that really put us to shame with the infrastructure that we have.
You know, I agree with your views on that, on the New York efforts for high-speed trains. I was involved in a different life at a different time. I was involved in the financing side of that project, and we spent quite a lot. I still believe there's value to it. It's, as you
absolutely.
said, it ties into it. One of the interesting parts of the presentation last night was that they've thought through the economics of how to rebuild the private public partnerships around each of not only the stations, but also around the entire construction of this. 17,000 construction jobs and 1,500 permanent jobs when it's finished. So when you look at that type of a
now this is just that one project.
Just that one project, yeah. They did their homework, and of course, so you say, all right, so why does a high-speed train attract mechanical engineers? Well, we partnered with IEEE and AIAA in terms of the turbines. There was a whole section, a whole discussion on the section that the braking with the train generates about 10 megawatts of electricity. So can they put batteries on this particular train, which is a new concept, and then how do you offload that electricity to the grid at different stations? I was amazed at the thought process and the technology that went into it. And when you mentioned again the New York State piece of it, I could see it easily fitting in something that supports that region. It would just be a huge, huge perk for it.
Well, and that the train travel is so critical. I mean, if you can't save time, and if you're not going to have reliability as part of the factor, you're not going to grow ridership. And I think there's a way to grow ridership, and in this country, because we're thirsting for a faster train travel and a more reliable train system. And we can do that with infrastructure investment. And I'd love to hear more about the plan that you were describing.
Yeah, I'll send you some information up on it. Carlos Aguilera, who's the CEO of it, he's got a small team that came in. He's friends with one of our leaders, our section leaders at the South Texas section. It's just a brilliant presentation. They figured it would take 10 years to get it approved. So they're 6.5 years into that cycle now, and then up to building it. They've dotted the I's and crossed the T's, so to speak, across the entire project, but it was well done.
Well, there's some clever financing that's going on these days. So,
yeah,
and that can be the key to the success.
Well, it was interesting because there were some 50 different companies involved in the whole startup, and it's an international consortium that was started out of the JR Central group in Japan. In my prior life with Sony, I've been to Japan 300 times, and we always traveled by train. It was the easiest and most convenient when we were there. You get on a bullet train, you had everything you needed. So being part of the Texas group, one of the questions was, can I carry on the train? And the answer was no.
There you go. Good answer.
We have a question here from Robert Kennedy, and he reminds us that today is the 75th anniversary of the Trinity test in New Mexico. And he would like to understand your views on America's international security relationships in light of the existential transnational threats like the pandemics and climate control. He then says, further clarifies that, says, in the context of COVID-19 in the US, is the US considering further nuclear tests? And Robert was a 1994 congressional fellow.
Oh, wow. So the first part of the question again is?
He was looking for your views on America's international security relationships in light of the transnational threats like the pandemics and climate change.
Yeah, I think that obviously, again, another learning curve that comes about, and making certain that security is going to be very important, making certain that perhaps we lead the world in developing standards and policy formats that international groups can buy into, so that our uh, intellectual property and our public health policies are all driven by a security element that enables us to go forward with all the more strength because of I think that issue having to be addressed. We're reminded with this pandemic how interconnected we all are, and how the policies need to be reaching far beyond a national boundary. And so hopefully the development through international discussion and negotiation can create, I think, the sort of security outcomes that we require, and the protection of all sorts of elements, including intellectual property and the like. I think that the whole effort on nuclear, in the second part of this question, as we look at the development of our roadmap for comprehensive climate change, there's a great contribution made by nuclear in this country for clean energy, and we can't deny that. And for those who want to undo nuclear, just come up with your strategy for the great numbers of megawatts that you have to replace. I think that R&D that accompanies the efforts for nuclear, and the commitment to clean energy strategies, which nuclear provides, make it a go-to as we go forward. I think it's part of a clean energy agenda, and whatever we can do in terms of testing and research, we should do, so as to be able to build the infrastructure that we need to meet these goals. There are many facilities in this country that are well served, that provide great service toward that clean energy agenda.
I started my career working in nuclear power, and then went to nuclear weapons. So the conversations that we have ongoing today, I'm a little biased, I will admit, because having been involved with 6 different reactor projects in the United States, I'm intrigued by the concept of small modular reactors and the amount of work that our members are doing. Also, the work that's going on at Oak Ridge in terms of how do you produce what becomes more effective. So instead of going with these huge, 1,000 megawatt units and what have you, can we put a bunch of small ones in different municipalities?
And basically that provides relief to the grid,
Correct.
Which has been stressed out, and the investments there, or the investment strategy there is that microgrids do make sense and offer the kind of relief that to our wires distribution and transmission network out there in a powerful way.
Well, thank you. We have another question here from another one of our volunteer leaders, Ross here. Ross asked the question, first he says, thank you, Congressman, for your comments on the new energy technologies, and particularly their delivery to disadvantaged communities. This is clearly critical and will help build the economies of these communities. Could you outline some of the challenges you see in achieving this?
Well, the challenges are in probably the resources, so that we require a set aside of resources that we commit to addressing environmental injustice that has been allowed to take hold in many neighborhoods. I think also the challenges to bring some new technology like net zero emission technology in the transportation sector, making certain that we can introduce into all sorts of housing, public housing included, infrastructure that will be there for fueling opportunities, and making certain that the changes aren't just left for certain portions of America and other portions being left behind. So I think the challenges are on building the infrastructure, on acknowledging the resources and by setting aside a given amount of resources for improvements in neighborhoods that have been impacted by the environmental injustice are a great way to start. And to make certain that, we even advance some of our energy efficiency efforts in buildings that will provide for a reduction in consumption of energy consumption, which would be important. With the pandemic, there were these learning curves galore that came, and it became very apparent that there were, impacts on certain neighborhoods where the COVID-19 experience wasn't, across the board an even impact. There were precedents of, the pandemic took hold in some of these neighborhoods to a much higher level. And so I think that was instructive, and we need to respond to it, because that weaker health condition then led to more vulnerability with the COVID-19 virus. And, these efforts, I think, now need to incorporate what have been systemic situations across the board in our economy that now need to be addressed, so that we can speak with fundamental fairness.
Yeah, I agree. Congressman, we have a question here from our president, Brian Ehrlich.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian took over on July 1st, has been with us as part of the lead up to it for a year. And I will preface that he's also another fellow nuclear engineer. So, Brian, good morning.
Well,
sounds like a bias. Sounds like a bias.
Congressman Tonko, I appreciate your taking the time, and I've been listening to you and Tom Dealing presenting all of the technical challenges that Congress has been working with and wrestling through. And what goes through my mind, because we're talking about data analysis and problem solving, things that we do as a normal course of our careers. But at the same time,
that's why we need you at the discussion, or actually need you at the table.
Well, that is my question, is how do we get engineers to step up into Congress and participate, and not just as fellows, because we have tried to help Congress by having a lot of ASME fellows and engineers volunteer, but really true people that are at the table and the vote. Because you listen to the challenges, and it's not just engineers, it's engineers, scientists, doctors, people who have the knowledge that can help solve these kind of problems that you're discussing. And yet through my career, which is pretty long, it's been hard to get scientists and engineers to really want to run for public office. And then you have to get them to win, and of course it's a scary thing for a lot of engineers. They don't want to be voted on or voted down. They'd rather be designing a rocket to the moon, So what can we do?
Well, I think number one, the technical background, Brian, that engineers bring is so essential in this era of government, because we're living in with complex issues, and they need complex responses, and they need to be very thorough. I remember when I was serving in the state assembly in Schenectady, New York, as part of my congressional district, but it was also part of my assembly district. And I was there when they set up the first annual tribute to Steinmetz. And they had a panel that developed Steinmetz's persona, from the professional status to the personal status to community status. And I believe it was active perhaps in a school board or something, but the research done by these panelists was interesting. And the one panelist on community activity said that through her research, she found quotes from him saying that Steinmetz thought engineers should be the first in line to run for office because they're problem solvers, they are analytical thinkers, and they bring great depth to the discussions that have to happen on policy. So there's an inspirational anecdote that speaks to all of us as engineers. But there has been, because of the need for science-based, evidence-based discussions and formats and outcomes, There have been these efforts to recruit scientists and engineers to run for office. There's a 317 group that has endorsed me in my run for re-election, that has gone out and recruited candidates based on their science prowess. So that's encouraging. It's an outright, straightforward attempt to bring that kind of thinking into the channels of government at all levels. And then for those who don't think that's their bag, but know that they have a lot to offer to policy development, I think it's important to encourage that I've had a number of engineers call and offer, and we've taken them up on offers, to be a foundation, a panel, a sounding board on policy, where they will offer in the energy sphere, the transportation sphere, education sphere, their thoughts on what should be incorporated so that engineering matters come into discussion and are woven into the final context of a design for legislation. So there are ways to, I think, formalize the relationship with these sounding boards, these panels, instructive panels, partners, whatever we call them, to running for campaign opportunities. We can network any of the engineers out there who are looking at doing something like that to the forces that really are looking to draw engineers into their think tank and into their support category.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, because of the initiative that Congress is taking, and I'll help point people in the right direction. Thank you very much.
I can tell you that this freshman class that is in Congress that got elected has had a lot of science and tech minds, and they're speaking their thoughts boldly and in a very effective way. And so that's encouraging.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Congressman, I want to ask a question. I know that that's not the kosher here, so to speak, but to me, it's always been about engineering education. You know, you and I had chatted earlier on about K through 12 and the STEM initiatives or STEAM initiatives,
Sure.
which I fully believe in. We're in the process. We just kicked off a brand new capital campaign at ASME, something that has not been there for quite some time. It's 20 years since we did the last one. And one of our legs, our pillar of the campaign, is the K through 12 STEM education. You know, as you know, we have a very progressive program with Inspire, which gets out to the tier 1, tier 2 schools and the communities that are not serviced correctly. But to me, the importance of increasing the participation and empowering the low-income or underrepresented communities is critical. And I see using this type of vehicle as a jumpstart. Is there anything specifically going on in Congress with the K through 12 in those communities? And if not, well, what could we do?
Yeah, well, a lot needs to be done. I know that our Education and Labor Committee, headed by Bobby Scott from Virginia, has been very active in making certain that we're reaching all kids about, you know, a tech evolution and revolution here in our country. The Energy Subcommittee chair, Bobby Rush from Illinois, has been very, very intent on diversifying the workforce in the technical areas. Our HEROES bill that passed, as I said, 2 months ago in May, provides nearly $100 billion in education funding because of the recognition that there's a crucial role that education plays in pushing us not only out of a disaster, but into economic success. And so I think, you know, with those efforts for education, we need to strengthen the STEM portion. We have to make certain that we're reaching the atypical students, female students, students of color, that perhaps haven't seen the impact of an engineering career. You know, you talk to folks who are engineers, many times it's been a generational thing in their family. And so I think it's important for us to bring into the fabric of public policy. We know how education is going to be so crucial to not only propel the next generation for their careers, but also to assure that we retrain workers for our future economy. So community colleges come to mind in that regard for retraining, recertification, rematriculation. The community colleges stand to gain in some of our bills, giving them the infrastructure they need and a convenient opportunity because they're staked in the local communities. So yeah, that work needs to be done. I participate annually in Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute's program in Troy, where they host on a Saturday Black families in engineering. And the parents bring in their children, and there are all sorts of experimental interactive opportunities for the kids. And it's a great response every year. And it encourages them to become aware of the excitement that's associated with the engineering profession. And so, you know, there are ways to capture the kids, but STEM is very critical. I've got many bills that I've introduced that encourage, you know, math and science, curricular development in the elementary settings. Sometimes we walk away from it in the elementary settings, and you'll even hear comments made by teachers who chose that career path because they weren't good in math. Well, I think you need to be good in math if you're a teacher, especially in elementary ed, because there's a fear factor. I don't know how we introduce that fear factor, but we do. And kids are always like taught to think that math is tough and frightening. And so there are many dynamics that we need to incorporate, but starting it early on, I've advanced many STEM legislative items in my tenure in the House, and you know, developing the resources and the flexibility and training the teacher so that they can be part of engineering somehow in their off moments in summer is important.
Well, thank you for that. We two things that we kicked off here is we're currently, as a matter of fact, I have a meeting at noon today to talk about what we would do with the technician level, the 2-year individuals. So where I lived as a high school student, Westchester Community College was there, and I went to Manhattan College, and a lot of the juniors that transferred in came from Westchester Community College just based on their families' abilities to support that, and then went on to it. So my desire is, how do we have a program that is a 2-year degree program that allows today's technicians, if you look at one of our modern factories, as you've been through as many as I have, there's that whole workforce that's there. They're very good family wage jobs. They keep the economy running, and it also gives you the opportunity to work and learn at the same time. So I'm a big believer of that personally. I'm pleased that,
you know, and as we're talking, I can't help but think of the millions, tens of millions who have been pushed into the ranks of the unemployed because of this COVID experience. Some of those jobs may never come back. Some of those businesses may have folded with this crisis. And so we're going to have, I think, an onslaught of individuals looking at career paths. Is this a moment forced on them where they can rethink their career opportunities? And so now more than ever, we need to make certain that the flexibility, the segue into these programs is there, and that the awareness is struck. Many times it's just simply not understanding what engineering and science is doing in many of these capacities. And that's where mentor programs come in really handy with private sector, where I've seen GE in my district do some great mentoring with students so that they are made aware of the opportunities that career path offers. And I'm thinking of another where it's targeted just at females. So girls in the middle school age group can come in and do a summer workshop, a summer camp on all sorts of things, including wind turbines. And they're just, you know, they build their turbines, they test them, there's competition who has the best outlay, good stuff, so that they can understand the challenges and the excitement of the engineering business.
It's the fun in engineering.
Yeah.
Congressman, thank you. I very much enjoy this. Very much appreciate you championing ASME and engineering. We'll do more together. I will remind everybody that we recorded this, so it'll be up on YouTube Live, and we'll just keep pushing it out to our members and letting everybody know all the work that's going on. So, Congressman, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
It's been my pleasure. Yes, and have a safe summer, and stay strong, stay well, stay safe.
Thank you.
And for many of us, stay home to avoid the trouble.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
Enjoy.
you're welcome.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Go ASME.